Oh, the summertime is come, and the trees are sweetly blooming, and the wild mountain thyme grows around the purple heather. Will you go, lassie, go? And we'll all go together to pick wild mountain thyme all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? I will build my love a bower by yon crystal fountain.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gord McCall. I'm the Artistic and Executive Director of the Lyric Theatre here in downtown Swift Current, Saskatchewan. It's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to Lyric Digital Stage Write Out Loud number 12. It's going to be a special show. The first thing I want to do is wish you a very happy St. Patrick's Day, and may the luck of the Irish be with you as we move along in this crazy world of ours. I first want to say, as always, that we acknowledge we stand on Treaty 4 land. Treaty 4 is the original lands of the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Saulteaux, the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we are committed to move forward in partnership with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. We also continue to stand in solidarity with all people who stand in opposition to oppression, lack of freedom of expression, and the violent suppression of free speech and basic human rights. We stand with members of the Black community, people of color, Indigenous peoples, 2S LGBTQ communities, people with disabilities, and all who experience oppressive marginalization and systemic racism and hatred, including injustice of this nature that occurs in our own country. Now, this has been an incredible year, as we know, and it was on March 14th, just a couple of days ago, that last year we shut down the operation at the Lyric Theatre due to COVID-19. We haven't reopened yet, but we're hoping that we're on the brink of it. As we know, vaccines are now starting to happen, not just in our province, but in our area of Southwest Saskatchewan. We are so grateful for this, and we are planning to return with our Great Southwest Shakespeare Festival this summer. So God willing, we'll be able to do that. Everybody will get vaccinated, and we will move down the road in a very optimistic, lighthearted manner from that point forward. Now, tonight, we have a very special treat. Our host is Terry Toews. Our author is Kristine Scarrow. And our musical interlude is presented by Jess and Dustin Olmsted. We know you're going to have a great time, so I'm going to now pass on the proceedings to Terry from the Write Out Loud Committee and wish you all a great evening. Take it away, Terry.
Welcome to another installment of Write Out Loud on the Lyric Digital Stage. I am Terry Toews, and I sit on the Write Out Loud Committee at the Lyric Theatre in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. We have a great event lined up for you tonight, and I would like to begin by thanking some very important contributors to Write Out Loud and to the Lyric Digital Stage in general. The Write Out Loud Committee wishes to thank the Writers' Union of Canada for their sponsorship of this event through the National Public Reading Program. The Writers' Union has been extremely supportive of our program over the past several years, and we cannot thank them enough for their sponsorship of these events. A donation from the Voth family has covered all of the musical portions of all of our online events this past season, and we can't run this program without that kind of community involvement and support. So thank you very much to the Voth family for their contribution to Write Out Loud. Gord McCall, the artistic and executive director of the Lyric Theatre, is the force behind the Lyric Digital Stage, which is his brainchild, a result of our having to close the doors of our beloved theatre because of COVID, of course, almost a year ago now. He is the person who takes all of the video fragments that we send to him and sews them into a production we can be proud to have on the Lyric Digital Stage. And he also does this for Open Stage and the Youth Talent Night, as well as some special events. Last month, he did it with a brand new computer, and we all have experienced the trials and tribulations of trying to make a new computer work for us instead of the other way around. He also did it in the midst of a cascade of catastrophes involving the furnace and the water pipes and the sprinkler system at the Lyric Theatre, which must have felt like it was falling down around his ears at one point or another. We owe him a huge thank you for all he has done for keeping all of our programs running during this very challenging time. So thanks a million, Gord. We owe a debt of gratitude to all of the authors and musicians who have rolled with the COVID punches when we have needed them to, and who often went outside their comfort zones to produce the videos for these online events. They all went above and beyond for us, and our appreciation knows no limits. We have an excellent event for you again this month, and the musical interlude will be brought to you by popular local musicians Jess, Rouleau, and Dustin, Olmsted. They have graced the Right Out Loud stage before, but that was back in the theater, and they have not joined us on the Right Out Loud digital stage, so we welcome them and thank them for bringing their original tunes and unique talent to our event. Jess on vocals, cello, and guitar, and Dustin on vocals, guitar, and mandolin are a musical couple with chemistry both on and off stage. Their whimsical songwriting and unique take on covers will leave you wanting more. It is a great pleasure to introduce our featured author this evening, Kristine Scarrow, the author of the excellent young adult novels, The Gamer's Guide to Getting the Girl, The 11th Hour, If This Is Home, and Throwaway Girl. Her novels do not pull their punches, telling sometimes difficult truths in a way that can be understood and appreciated by young and older readers alike. Kristine has a special interest in writing as a healing art, and she offers writing workshops to individuals and groups in order to foster that healing. In addition, she is the writer-in-residence at St. Paul's Hospital in Saskatoon as part of the groundbreaking Healing Arts program there. She's also been an editor and has published articles in a wide variety of magazines and publications. In addition to all of the above, she is also the mother of 3 young children. So you do the math. Obviously, she never sleeps. Thank you, Kristine, for being part of Right Out Loud this season and for appearing on the Lyric Digital Stage. And thank you, our wonderful audience, for tuning in once again for what I know will be another unforgettable experience. Enjoy.
Hello. I'm so honored to be here to be part of the digital Right Out Loud series here in Swift Current. I wish I could have been there in person, but alas, I am here recording from my home in Saskatoon. I was honored to be invited to be part of this. I wish I could have been there to meet you all in person. However, that is not the case. We are living in new times, and I know we kind of hoped that maybe with the onslaught of spring we would have been able to meet in person, but that wasn't the case. So I'd like to give a very warm thank you to Terry Toews, to Gord McCall, to the committee for having me, and also for the sponsorship from the Writers Union of Canada. So I am a young adult author living in Saskatoon. I am also currently a MFA in writing student at the University of Saskatchewan. I also work as the writer in residence at St. Paul's Hospital as part of their healing arts program. As such, I also study writing as a healing art, and so I conduct workshops within the community and with schools and other organizations on teaching writing as healing. And so I kind of have a varied role and I'm now stretching my wings in the MFA program and working on a short story collection and other kinds of fiction as well. But tonight I would like to share with you my book, If This Is Home. So this was the second book I published. All 4 of my young adult titles are published by Dundurn Press in Toronto. And this one was a Snow Willow Award nominee last year, which was really exciting. So in If This Is Home, it follows the path of 16-year-old Jess and her sister Joelle. Her mom is a single mom and she gets suddenly ill. And so Jess goes on a trek to find the dad she's never really known in the hopes that he's going to be able to come and fix everything. So, and of course, like all the best laid plans, they never quite go as planned. So I'm going to read first from chapter 2. And this is when Jess she comes home from school and she finds emergency services at her house. And so she and her mom is taken away in an ambulance just before this. So chapter 2. I awake with a start to the sound of beeping monitors, a slow, steady rhythm. I open my eyes and bristle from the bright fluorescent lights above. So it is all true. We are actually in the hospital. This wasn't a dream, after all. Mom is sleeping. Despite all the tubes and things sticking out of her and how pale she looks, she seems to be resting comfortably. Ellie is sleeping too. She's in the chair beside me, curled up into a ball. She looks so small and vulnerable, like a kitten. I stroke her forehead gently and then reach for my mom's hand. Her hand is cold, her skin papery thin and almost translucent. When did she get to be so frail, I wonder? Seeing her this way, examining her up close, I can't believe how different she looks. Maybe I was just so busy trying to keep up with everything that I hadn't noticed. After all, Mom hadn't been feeling well for a long time. I think back to how many times I told her she should see a doctor. It's just a cold, Jess, Mom kept assuring me. Mom, colds don't last this long, I'd say. I just got run down. That's all. That's the thing. I'd had plenty of colds before, but never one that had me in coughing fits like she'd have. Sometimes her long, hacking coughs would wake us up at night. Sometimes I'd rush into her room asking if there was anything I could do. Her whole body would shake with each cough. I'm fine, she'd assure me, waving me off. Go back to sleep. Now I gaze at her face and a lump forms in my throat. This isn't fine. Why didn't I make her do something about this sooner? I smooth some of her hair back from her face. Despite how different she looks, my mother is still beautiful. She's always been a head-turner. For as long as I can remember, men have openly stared at her. She's tall and thin with long curly blonde hair that cascades halfway down her back. She has huge blue eyes. I know she's always been proud of the attention. To her, her eyes are her best asset. Those eyes can promise you the world. That's what your dad used to say to people about me. Mom would get a twinkle in her eye and a flush in her cheeks retelling the story. When I was a young girl, Mom often talked to me about the magical love story between her and Dad. On special occasions when Mom was getting ready to go out, I'd perch on the side of her bed and watch her apply her perfume and makeup, mesmerized by her beauty. I'd look at her and wonder, thinking that I'd never seen someone so beautiful. Except then Dad stopped coming around as much and everything was different. Mom didn't dress up and go out at night much after that, but she kept telling me that he'd be coming back soon. Life on the road is busy, you know, Jess, she'd say to me when I'd asked when I'd see him next. Your dad is an amazing musician. He's got to be out there playing if he's going to make it big. And your dad, he's going to be real big someday. Mom never stopped believing he was out there working hard for us and that he'd be back. But he only came back once in a while, and often for only one night at a time. He'd call unexpectedly to let us know he'd be coming into town. She'd start humming or singing around the house when she knew he was coming. She'd often spend hours cooking food so she could spoil him with delicious meals, and she'd scrub the house until not a speck of dirt remained. We'd be practically buzzing with excitement when we'd hear the familiar rumble of his van coming up the street. I'd light up like a Christmas tree when I saw him. He'd scoop me up and twirl me around, and I'd feel so loved and protected when he put his big, strong arms around me. He had his own special name for me, Jaybird. He'd also pick up my mom off her feet and swing her around. Mom would blush and hit him playfully, but I could tell she loved it. I wish I had more memories of him, but in truth, I only got to be with him for a few hours at a time on the days he came home. Mom would put me to bed early so that the two of them could go out, and when I woke up in the morning, I'd run to check if he was still around. I'd see them tangled in each other's arms in bed, and my heart would swell with pride seeing my parents together like a real family. I'd hope and pray that he'd stick around for longer, but when they awoke, he'd usually start packing his bag. He'd explain that he had to get back on the road. I could see the disappointment on my mom's face each time because it mirrored my own. As I got older, it got harder to keep feeling so good about him. I'd see my friends with their dads playing catch or going to the store together, and my heart hurt thinking about mine. I'd tell everyone he was on tour, but when he didn't come back for months at a time, my friends started wondering if he even existed. In grade 7, after not seeing my dad for over a year, I started wondering if he even existed too. And if he really loved us, why wasn't he here with us? Your birthday's coming up, JJ, Mom had remarked to me one morning, just a couple of weeks before my 12th birthday. Yeah, I said noncommittally. How about we have a nice get-together for you and your friends in the backyard, she offered. I'd shrugged. Our lawn was so overgrown, the weeds were so high, it looked like a jungle back there. Then there was the car, the metal heap of junk that stood out like a sore thumb. It wasn't the party atmosphere I wanted. Sensing my displeasure, Mom had sighed. Jace, your friends aren't going to care about what the yard looks like. They'll be here to celebrate you. I'll just tell them to bring their safari equipment. It'll be great, I said sarcastically. Mom had thrown down the fork she was holding with such force it bounced loudly across the table. Is there a problem with the life I've made for you? She'd asked, stern. Life is perfect, I'd replied. What more could I want? I knew with my bad attitude I was about to push my mom over the edge. If there's something you feel you're really lacking, let's hear it, she'd barked. How about a father? I'd shot back. Mom's face had changed. She'd pursed her lips tightly, taken a deep breath. You have a father, JJ. He loves you very much. He loves both of us. He just can't be here as much as he'd like. Even Mom had known her words sounded hollow. As much as he'd like? How about ever? I'd yelled. Is that what this is about? Mom spat. Your dad will be at your birthday. How can you be so sure? He wasn't at my last birthday. That was the truth. I'd waited all day for him to come, thinking there was no way he'd miss my important day, but he'd never shown up. Mom had bitten her nails nervously as the day had gone on, knowing I was only half interested in the small party I was having. I'd watched the window like a hawk. I'd been sure he was just late, that something must have kept him, but he never showed up. There wasn't even a phone call. A year later, Mom tried to convince me he wouldn't fail me again. He'll be there, Mom assured me, her voice softer. I'll believe it when I see it, I'd said, running from the room to fight the tears that pricked my eyelids. When the day of my party rolled around, I had woken up in a foul mood. Mom had put a plastic tablecloth on our rotting picnic table and had brought out a mishmash of dishes for our guests. She'd made a chocolate cake with thick chocolate frosting, and it looked delicious. She'd counted out 12 candles for the cake. "I don't have an extra one for good luck, but you don't need it, JJ." I'd known she was trying to reassure me, but I'd felt like I needed all the luck I could get. Mom had been over-enthusiastic about the whole party, wanting to make the day special for me, but all I'd been able to think of was how everything we had wasn't good enough. I'd been worried that my friends would notice that my party looked nothing like their parties, where there were tons of decorations, games, and food, and everything looked picture perfect. And all I'd been able to think about was how my dad wasn't going to be there and how awful it made me feel. As though Mom could read my mind, she kept saying, "He'll be here, JJ. You'll see." When my guests had arrived, Mom had poured them tall glasses of iced tea and fawned over their outfits. Nobody had seemed to mind how ugly our backyard was or how plain the party was, but I'd sat sullen, unable to shake the disappointment of my father not showing up. Didn't he know how important birthdays were? And of all birthdays, this one? "I have friends here who don't even think you exist," I wanted to scream. "Why don't we open gifts?" Mom said brightly. She'd gathered the gifts and set them before me. I'd stared at them without moving. My friends had shifted uncomfortably in their seats, wondering why I looked so miserable. "Go on, Jace," Mom had said, her tone serious. She'd given me a look to tell me to smarten up, but I hadn't cared. I'd started ripping bright red wrapping paper off one of the gifts, but I hadn't even been able to muster the energy to look excited. Underneath the paper, there'd been a jewelry box covered in bright pink velvet. It had fake jewels glued on the top. It was for Monica, a girl I'd gone to school with since kindergarten. "That is so beautiful," my mom had oozed. She squeezed Monica's shoulders affectionately. The girls had oohed and awed at my gift. "Do you like it?" Monica had asked. She'd seemed puzzled by my lack of reaction to what everyone else thought was such a nice gift. I hadn't meant to be so disrespectful. I really hadn't. But all I could think about was how badly I wanted another life. One with a nice house and a pretty yard. One with a dad. I'd pursed my lips together when I'd started to feel them tremble, but the flood of emotion had been too strong. I'd burst into tears. Maybe we should go," Jacqueline had suggested. Everyone looked very uncomfortable. Even my mom couldn't keep acting as though everything was okay. All at once, the girls had started to rise from the table and gather their things. A pile of presents sat unopened on the table. Even the cake was untouched, the candles unlit. "Are you sure, girls? We haven't even had cake," Mom had said with panic in her voice. "How could someone be so ungrateful?" I'd heard Monica say as they walked toward the gate. Amanda slowed her pace and turned toward me while the other girls continued walking. "Yeah, and see? I told you she didn't even have a dad," Jacqueline had added. I'd wanted to sink into the ground. I'd wanted to die from embarrassment. I wanted to scream as loud as I could from all the hurt I was feeling. Instead, I sobbed uncontrollably. "Thank you for coming, girls," Mom had called after them as they hurried out of the yard, grateful to be leaving. Then Mom had picked up the torn wrapping paper from the grass and stuffed it into a plastic bag. Amanda had stayed back to help her. "Thank you, Amanda," Mom had said. Amanda ran up to me, whispered sorry, patted my back before heading home, and I hadn't been able to say anything. "I'll just go and get these glasses washed up," Mom said to me gently. I nodded through my sobs, unable to stop the flood of tears. "Where's my little jaybird?" Dad's familiar voice called out from the entrance of the gate. Mom had run out of the house toward him, throwing her arms around him. "Eleanor," he breathed as he held her close. "Have I missed you?" I could just feel her excitement at being in his arms. They stood in a tight embrace for several moments. "Jace!" Mom had turned in my direction, leading Dad toward me. She glowed with happiness. "I told you he'd be here." My dad had released his grip on my mom's hand and come toward me with his arms outstretched. "Why in the world is my baby girl crying on her birthday?" he'd said, his eyebrows furrowed with concern. He'd stood waiting for me to jump into his arms like always, but I just couldn't do it. Not this time. "You're too late!" I'd shrieked. I'd stormed past him and run into the house. I'd gone straight to my room and slammed the door. He come after me and grabbed me before I could make it to my bed. "I'm here, JJ," he reminded me. He put his arms around me, squeezed me tight, sending me back into uncontrollable sobs. I'd wanted to hit him, to push him away, to make him feel like garbage for not being around. But it didn't matter how mad I was. The feel of his strong arms around me, holding me tight, and the smell of him made me crumple in defeat. No matter how desperately I'd wanted to hate him, I couldn't. I actually have a dad, and he's here. Finally.
Everybody, we're Dustin and Jess, and we're going to play some songs for you. This first song we're going to open up with is an original called Where You Go.
Take me where you go, on the path the woods unwinding. Take me where you grow, in the shadows wolves are hiding now. Go far, but take me. Run fast, be free in finding now. Tracks on winter snow, swift the fox, the wolves are biting. Mountain gales they blow through the trees, the winds are crying out. Go far, but take me. Run fast and be free. Go far, but take me. Run fast and be free in finding now. Dancing as they glow across the peaks, auroras brightening, stars will guide them home. Galaxies and moons are lighting now. Go far, but take me. Run fast, be free. Go far, but take me. Run fast and be free in finding now.
This song is called Little Bird. This song is by Vampire Weekend. It's called Hold You Now. Reason why you think you gotta leave. This is a future glory, don't make the case for me. Did my best and all the rest was hidden by the clouds. I can't carry you forever, I can hold you now. Leaving on your wedding day, all calm and dressed in white. All the keys and memories, one last crooked night. Pews are getting filled up, organs playing loud. I can't carry you forever, I can hold you now.
Alright.
This next song is one that I wrote, and it's called Two Hearts. When I'm thinking I know what is listening, it's you that I find. You are my heart, you make the days roll by. tune. It can be beat, but then when you take a trip, it becomes a battle to deal such as this. I hope that you're safe, you won't be replaced, but until then it's desire when you're gone, baby. I nearly come undone. And then when you return, honey, we'll make two hearts into one. After a long day working and toiling, it's you that I find steady and calm, and all my cares roll away with the sweat of the day, and your hands fall in mine. It is divine, but then when you go away, I have no idea that can brighten my day. And when you return, the sun it'll burn, and all I feel is desire when you're gone, baby. I nearly come undone. And then when you return, honey, we'll make two hearts into one. Desire when you're gone, baby. I nearly come undone. And then when you return, honey, we'll make two hearts into one. This next one is a tune not by Whitehorse originally, but the version we're doing, and it's called I'm on Fire. Hey, little girl, is your daddy home? And did he go and leave me all alone? Oh, I got a bad desire. Oh, I'm on fire.
Tell me, little babe, is he good to you? Can he do for you the things that I do? Oh no, I can take you high. Oh, I'm on fire.
It's like someone took a knife, baby, edgy and dull, cut a 6-inch valley through the middle of my soul. And I wake up with the sheets soaking wet, and there's a freight train running through the middle of my head. Only you can cure my desire. Oh, I'm on fire. Ooh, ooh. once again, we're Dustin and Jess, and we want to thank you for spending some time with us.
We're really looking forward to the Write Out Loud with Kristine Scarrow. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Bye.
Hi, welcome back. So one thing I wanted to just take a moment to laugh about was when I was asked if I could do some videos for the reading because we couldn't be together in person. I remember thinking, so I live in a house with 5 people, my husband and 3 teenagers and a dog, and there is never a dull moment around here. It is never quiet, it seems, and we have been stuck with one another for months on end, and I wasn't really sure how many attempts it would take to complete a reading here, but we're doing okay so far. So the second book I'd like to share with you is the latest release, and it is called The Gamer's Guide to Getting the Girl. This is also published by Dundurn Press in Toronto, and this was released in 2019. This is kind of a fun story. It really came out of having 2 teenage sons who love to spend their time gaming, and a mom who was always fighting against it and trying to get them off of there and pursue other things, like read a bit more. And I was always looking at gaming as a negative thing, and it was really turning into a big power struggle. So one of the cool things to come out of the research of doing a book like this book is about 2 teenage boys who love to game, and they become stuck in a mall during a power outage and what is to be Saskatchewan's biggest storm in history. And so they're stuck with a bunch of other strangers and having to wait out this massive storm in a mall. And so each chapter has a heading that is a tip. So each chapter heading is a tip for how to get the girl, so to speak. And so I'm going to read from tip number 7, which is doing the right thing isn't always easy. Like we're going to get a real tornado, Cooper says. I'm pushing Ira's stroller for Valerie while Ira sleeps in her arms. I don't know, this storm's a lot worse than anything I can remember, Irwin says. Peter hears us talking. The deadliest tornado on record happened in 1912, he tells us, in Regina. Regina's about 2.5 hours from Saskatoon. It's the capital city of Saskatchewan. You mean the worst in Saskatchewan, I ask? No, it was the worst tornado in Canadian history. 28 people died. My parents were in that storm. I watch Mildred's eyes grow wide as she takes in her husband's words. Yeah, and there wouldn't have been any kind of warning system then, would there have been? I say. Well, obviously the more time people have to respond, the better, Cooper says. The thing is, Peter explains, scientists can't actually predict with certainty where or when a tornado will form. Radar can only detect when the conditions known to form tornadoes exist. It's something called ground truth. Human eyes must witness the tornado in order for it to be confirmed. By then, isn't it too late to warn people, Cooper asks? That's why warnings are often given out sooner than that. But if there are too many false alarms, people can start ignoring the warnings, thinking that the chances are pretty slim. It's not like we get F5 tornadoes like the United States, Irwin says. Actually, we might get them too, I tell him. I remember learning about this at school. The prairies are now the northern tip of Tornado Alley. We probably get a lot more tornadoes than we know about because we have sparse population in a lot of areas and a lot of land. Some might never get spotted. Then why don't we have sirens to alert us like some communities do? Irwin asks. I shrug. Because we rely on weather forecasts, TV, phone alerts, I guess. A lot of good that does us now, Cooper says sharply. Yeah, power outages make things a lot worse, that's for sure, Peter says. How do people get the warnings if there's no power? People need lead time to get somewhere safe. Stop talking like that, Peter, Mildred cries out. Honey, that's what we're doing right now. We're keeping safe. He wraps his arms around her shoulder, caresses her arm. Too bad we don't have a battery-powered radio, I say. Sometimes the radio posts are abandoned in emergencies, Cooper says. Don't you get it? We're being forced to fend for ourselves. I don't even think they're trying to get to us. George said there were other people worse off than us and that they're getting to first. I think it's like a triage system where they sort people based on how serious their condition is, how quickly they need medical care. Right, George? I say. George is walking at full speed, shining his flashlight around us, oblivious to our conversation. George? George freezes and cocks his head to the side for a moment. We all stay quiet. Rory, Irwin, he whispers. They rush to his side at the ready. George motions with his chin toward the corridor where Spell Jewelers is. He turns to face us. I need all of you to stay together. Come and wait over by this wall. Nobody leaves. George nods at Cooper and me. We guide the crowd over to the wall adjacent to the elevators. It's a large open common space, so there's room for us to spread out. The only seating in the area is a leather love seat with a garbage bin at one end and a fake silk planter at the other. Immediately, I park Ira's stroller against the wall for Valerie and then guide Peter and Mildred to rest on the love seat. Cooper and Samara follow. Peter smiles at me gratefully as he helps Mildred onto the seat of the couch. They settle in together and Mildred rests her head on Peter's shoulder. His large hand is like a bear paw on his wife's slight shoulder. We should go and wake Farah up, Mildred says. She doesn't like storms. Cooper and I look at Peter stunned. Peter said earlier that they'd lost their daughter, that she'd drowned. If she had drowned, how could they go and wake her now? Peter smiles gently at his wife. Farah's resting peacefully, my love. His voice is reassuring and patient. One should never wake a sleeping child. Mildred nods and pats his thigh. You're probably right, dear. It dawns on me that Mildred is confused. She thinks that Farah is still a young girl and that she's still alive. Cooper and I exchange a knowing glance that Peter catches and returns, confirming our suspicion. We give Peter a sympathetic smile. He gives us a compassionate look. I'm sorry, Cooper says. That must be really hard. There's nothing I wouldn't do for this woman right here, Peter says. She's the best thing to have ever happened to me. When we said our vows 62 years ago, it was for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. Thankfully, she remembers more of the good times. My grandma had Alzheimer's, Cooper says. It was pretty rough on my mom. I remember that. We were about 10 years old. Cooper's mom was spending a lot of time taking his grandma to doctor's appointments or rushing over to her house when something was wrong. Cooper was the first kid in our class to get a house key and be allowed to stay home alone after school. We were all jealous because the rest of us had to either go to a friend's house where there was a parent or stay at the after-school program, which felt doubly sucky when you were the oldest kid there. It's definitely not easy, Peter agrees. My girl is sure a strong one, though. She's a fighter. He takes her hand and squeezes it. Mildred smiles dreamily, leans into him again. The fact that Mildred's forgetting her life and wants to wake up the daughter who passed away decades ago feels like a blow to the gut. It's the kind of stuff in the world that feels too hard to take in sometimes. Where do you think George, Rory, and Irwin went? I ask, changing the subject. We step away from Peter and Mildred. Maybe they spotted those guys again. We crane our necks to see if we can spot their flashlights, and sure enough, we see the beams bouncing across the walls at the far end of the corridor where I'd first spotted the men. If there are looters, what are security guards really going to do? Cooper asks. They don't get to carry any weapons or anything. They do have handcuffs, I say. But what if the other guys have weapons? Samara says. I shrug. We don't even know if they are looting, I point out. Maybe there's a perfectly legitimate reason for them to be down there. But I know it's unlikely. If you were trapped in a flooding mall, wouldn't you want to be with the majority? Don't they say there's strength in numbers? That's my Zach, Cooper teases, always believing the best in people. I'm far too cynical. Me too, Samara agrees. Great, another thing they have in common. Things never seem to work out that perfectly. I'm just saying, if it were me, I wouldn't want to be incriminated so easily. But that's easy because you would never do it. Cooper's right. I've never stolen anything in my life. Well, except for Geordie Sampson's Twizzlers on a bus ride to the Batoche National Historic Site. We'd been studying the Métis people in the Northwest Resistance of 1885 at school, and our teacher wanted to take us on a field trip to see the settlement along the South Saskatchewan River. It had been a 30-degree day, and I'd forgotten my water bottle and my spending money at home. The muffin my mom had packed for me had barely put a dent in my hunger when afternoon snack time rolled around. Geordie had bought about 6 packs of candy. I jokingly swiped one, but Geordie didn't seem to care all that much, so I just kept it and ate it. I shared with Coop, of course. I don't think anyone knows what they're truly capable of, especially in difficult times, Samara says. We think we're all great people who are law-abiding and on the straight and narrow, but I think we all have a darker side. Cooper and I ponder her words. What are you saying? Cooper asks, challenging her. You're not who we think you are? No, I'm not, she says matter-of-factly. I'm just saying when your back's against the wall, there's no telling how someone might react. They may be capable of things they never would have dreamed of doing in another circumstance. Like what? I ask. I wonder just what she means by all of this. Well, let's see. We've already collectively broken into and taken stuff from 2 restaurants in the food court and a designer dress store. That alone says something. Technically, we're all thieves here. I don't think that means we have a darker side, I argue. It was a decision we made in order to survive. Think of it like Boom Beach. We're trying to build up a base and amass resources for the good of our people. We aren't intentionally breaking the law for our own benefit. Aren't we? Samara says. Whose benefit was that for then? It's just different. Lots of really bad decisions are made in the name of survival. That doesn't make someone a bad person. In the eyes of the court, it does. People steal food or write bad checks to feed their kids. They go to jail. But they're not really hurting anyone, at least physically, I mean. A woman might think she doesn't have it in her to fight back when a man's hurting her. She may feel too weak or scared, but push her far enough, and one day she might just snap and find herself stabbing him to death. Are you planning on stabbing someone soon? Cooper says, laughing. Maybe, Samara says. I would if I had to, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. We wait for a smile or a laugh, but she keeps a straight face. I laugh nervously. My dream girl could be a mass murderer, and apparently I'm okay with that. That's the thing, she says. I don't think I'd lose any sleep over it. I hear what you're saying, I say, but I still don't think that makes someone a bad person. I don't think you're the conscienceless, morality-depraved soul you're making yourself out to be. Some of us just aren't as good as you, Zachary. She says my full name and it sends tingles down my spine. She turns on her heels and heads back to the rest of the group. I watch her walk away until I can't tell where she is. I've lost her silhouette in the dark. Did I say something wrong? I ask Cooper. I think I've upset her. No, I just think maybe she's dealing with more than we understand, Coop says. That, and we can't all be like Zach. He pats me on the back and smiles. Thank you again so much for having me and for being part of this, and kudos to you guys for being able to pivot and keep the events going. And yes, I couldn't be more thankful to be here. Thank you so much.